A logarithmic equation, such as log base 3 of x plus log base 3 of x minus 2 equals 1, can be solved in 4 simple steps. Let's talk about those 4 steps as we solve this equation. The first of those 4 steps to solve this logarithmic equation is to use the laws of logarithms to write it as a single logarithm. In some logarithmic equations, there is only a single logarithm to begin with, so you can skip this first step. But in this problem, there are 2 logarithms that are being of the same base that are being added together. And there is a law of logarithms that states that if you have the log of any base of m plus the log of that same base of n, you can write that as a single logarithm where the m and the n are multiplied. In this case, we have the log base 3 of x and the log base 3 of x minus 2. So let's rewrite that as a single logarithm where the x, the base stays 3, where the x and the x minus 2 are multiplied. Step 1 is complete. Use the law of logarithms to write it as a single logarithm when necessary. Once you have your logarithmic equation written with a single logarithm, you can move on to step 2, which is to apply the definition of a logarithm to rewrite the equation in exponential form. Log base b of x equals a is the same thing as, in exponential form, it would be b to the power of a equals x. The base of the logarithm to the power of the number on the other side of the equation equals what you're taking the log of. In this case, the base is 3, the number on the other side is 1, and we're taking the log of x times x minus 2. So rewriting that in exponential form would be 3 to the first power, 3 to the power of 1, equals x times x minus 2. Now that the equation is written in exponential form and there's no more logarithms, it's a little bit more straightforward to just solve this equation. In this case, solving the equation would be to evaluate 3 to the first power and to distribute x times the quantity of x minus 2, which gives you x squared minus 2x. And once you do that, you can see that this equation is quadratic. The highest power on x is 2. And to solve a quadratic equation, you first set that equal to 0. A quadratic equation could be solved with the quadratic formula, but this quadratic in fact factors. X squared minus 2x minus 3 factors to x minus 3 times x plus 1. And since the quadratic factors, it will be easy to find the 2 solutions to this equation by setting each factor equal to 0. First, let's set x minus 3 equal to 0, which yields x equals 3. And then we'll set x plus 1 equal to 0 and find that x equals negative 1. Now, we've solved for x and we found that x is equal to 3 and x is equal to negative 1. We're not positive those are the 2 answers yet, though. We're not going to call those 2 numbers our final answer until we complete step 4. And that step 4 is to verify the solutions in the original equation. And when I say verify the solutions, you have to realize that the domain of a logarithm is all positive numbers. You can only take the logarithm of a positive number. So if we take a look at our solution of x equals negative 1 and substitute a negative 1 in for x in the original equation, I'm going to put a negative 1 in for x in the original equation, what that yields is the log base 3 of negative 1 and the log base 3 of negative 1 minus 2. And what you can see after you simplify negative 1 minus 2 to get negative 3 is that in this, once you substitute the x equals negative 1, you end up with logarithms of negative numbers. Logarithms of negative numbers. And that is, again, outside of the domain of a logarithm. So x equals negative 1 is not a solution to this equation. Not a solution. How about x equals 3? Well, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to substitute a 3 in for x and make sure that we don't have the log of a negative number. If we do, we would have to say that x equals 3 is not a solution either. Let's see what happens. Well, when you substitute a 3 in for both occurrences of x and simplify, we get the log base 3 of 3 and the log base 3 of 1, both of which are positive numbers. That verifies that x equals 3 is in fact a solution. So this logarithmic equation, log base 3 of x plus log base 3 of x minus 2 equals 1, looked like it might have two solutions. X equals -1 is not a solution. X equals 3 is the only solution to this equation.